Welcome. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Matt Solso. I'm the Director of Philanthropy here at the Community Loan Fund. So glad that you guys have chosen to spend some time with us here at lunchtime. I'm really excited for you guys to hear about the impact about your donations and have an opportunity to express our gratitude to you for helping us make the work happen. Before we jump in, I do have a few housekeeping items. The first is we're a community, and community is in our name, and you are certainly part of our community. And as such, we would love to be able to see your faces if you're willing. So if you would, we'd love for you to go ahead and share your video with us so we can see who's here, and we'd appreciate that. You may have noticed that you are muted, and that's to help cut down on the background noise. But that doesn't mean that we don't want to hear from you. There's plenty of ways to participate. The first is using the chat button or the chat feature at the bottom. So at the bottom, you just click on that chat feature and you can ask a question, and we'll go ahead and answer those at certain points throughout the presentation. We'll also have a question and answer period at the end. So you can go ahead and we'll unmute you. You can raise your hand and ask a question as well. So lots of opportunity for participation, but just want to keep that background noise down. This is being recorded, so just want to let you guys know that. We record these so that we can share them with other donors that couldn't make it today. So we are being recorded. And just go over quickly the agenda. To be honest, it's pretty simple today. We're going to be hearing from John Hamilton, our acting president. We're also going to hear from Charlene Anderson, who is our farm and food lender, and she's actually going to introduce one of the folks that she works with on technical assistance, and we'll actually hear directly from that person as well. And then we'll finish up with John and have some question and answer at the end. I'm excited, can't wait for this. But before we jump into John here, we actually had a poll question that we wanted to ask folks. So I'll ask Steve to go ahead and put up that poll question. And the poll question is, which of our programs most appeal to you as a donor? You can choose more than one, and your answer is anonymous. So go ahead and pick and choose which ones maybe speak the most to you, and that's okay if they all do. They all do to me as well. So go ahead and fill that out, and we'll let the answers kind of trickle in here. And this is going to be important to us because it lets us know which of our programs are resonating with you. You guys are a nice small sample group for us. Lets us know what's resonating and maybe if there's a different program that needs more exposure as well. So feel free to answer that, and we'll share the results here in just a couple seconds. Now, I will say we practiced this yesterday and we didn't notice that the poll stays up automatically. You guys can actually close that window down to see what's behind it after you've voted or after the results are up. So you have control over that. If you can't see things, just go ahead and close that poll results. So, but here we go. I knew this was going to happen. They all do was the #1 answer at 81%. And that's what I love to hear. That tells us that we're doing a good job of letting you know what programs are out there and what they're doing. So thank you very much for your participation there. Without further ado, I would like to go ahead and get into the meat and potatoes of today and hand this off to John Hamilton, our acting president. So John, the Zoom is yours.
Well, thank you, Matt. It feels like a great homecoming to see each of you. It's really great to be here. I want to begin certainly by thanking each of you as donors. What you make possible is so important. Our borrowers couldn't do it without you, nor could we. So thank you. And I think, you know, also for just making time to be at this webinar. I don't know about you, but in these challenging times, it just makes, it feels good to be in community, even if it's over a Zoom. And so thank you for taking the time. I think for me, I enjoy these community building moments. I recharge. It sustains me for the work that lies ahead. I think also this type of webinar is a good learning by really leaning in and understanding more clearly, how do your donations transform into creating opportunity for others? How does that actually work? When that learning becomes clearer, the pathway forward becomes clearer. And when the path is clear, more people join in. And as we all know, the needs that have been put into sharp relief by the pandemic and the economic disruption, we need more people on this pathway. So for those that I've not yet met, I'm John Hamilton, and I consider it a real gift that the Community Loan Fund Board asked me to become the acting president in this moment of transition. I've been associated with the Community Loan Fund for over 30 years, and most recently have led the all the lending programs. This organization is just really near and dear to my heart. I think what I've really long valued about the Community Loan Fund is its ability to combine really good community organizing with good business. I really believe that these qualities working in tandem is what it takes to create lasting social change. So very powerful. So what I like to do when describing our work is to go back to our original logo, which was of a bridge between supporters and borrowers, so that neighbors can help neighbors. On one side, we go out and we rally the community resources from supporters like you who made donations and others who make investments. And we walk those resources across the bridge to bring it to be able to meet borrowers where they're at. So in essence, by acting as a bridge, we meet the needs of people, organizations, businesses who too often are overlooked. And by doing so, we unleash their potential. So I want to let you know that 100% of your gifts, all of it, goes directly into technical assistance to our borrowers. Our work across all the sectors that we work in, housing, childcare, business, our approach always begins with something very simple. Let's figure out what our borrowers truly need. You know, it's typical, nearly always, that the prospects approach us looking for a loan. But in fact, it is more often than not the technical assistance that we provide before, during, and after the loan that actually makes the biggest difference, even more so than the financing itself. So when we actually figure out what it is, what's it going to take to set these borrowers up for success, that's when we figure out, oh, we can make a loan here. So in a very real sense, your gift to a technical assistance is really what makes it possible for us to fill the financial capital gaps and make what's impossible possible. So, and because of your support this past spring, I'm so thankful for your support, we were able to establish the Borrower Stabilization Fund to deliver stepped up support to help keep households in their affordable homes and keep business teams intact. And it's unclear, we don't know whether we've weathered the worst of it or not. But what I do know is how hard our borrowers are working. They're doing everything they can. And with the Borrower Stabilization Fund's additional support, so far, so good. So what I'd like to do is to provide a quick year in review summary and go across the three core sectors of our work, beginning with housing and then to childcare and business. So in terms of housing, your gifts brought security and ownership to a group of residents that were able to buy the land under their manufactured homes. There were 4 resident groups consisting of 1,000 homeowners. And when these 4 resident groups went to acquire their parks, that's a big undertaking, right? I mean, these were also, in particular, large ones. They're multi-million-dollar businesses. And I don't know about you, but when I think about self-governance, I think about town meeting when I go to my town. And democracy is challenging. So imagine the responsibility that these residents suddenly have when their park comes up for sale. That's where our technical assistance comes in, that we meet them where they're at. We guide them based on the experience we've had with 132 others. We enlist peers from other parks to help and really make sure that they feel empowered to step into that role and responsibility of self-governance. So another aspect of our TA in this ROC area, the resident-owned community work that we do, is Some existing parks have a particular need. This year we worked with one park that had some openings, and we're developing some new pads to bring in additional homes. And we were able to work with them to provide extremely affordable housing and new homes that were energy efficient to 10 previously homeless veterans. Really powerful. And finally, just with COVID and the economic disruption preventing these parks from being able to meet indoors. You can imagine that we worked with all the 132 co-ops in figuring out how to deal with their day-to-day responsibilities without having the tool of indoor meetings. So that's the rock work. In terms of childcare, your gifts helped us with early learning centers to be able to create and add 57 additional spaces. So each morning, just like this morning, in these particular spaces, there are now teachers who are building strong bodies and brains for the youngest members of our community. In terms of technical assistance, what we don't do is help them with a curriculum or how to be better teachers. What we do is help them on the business side of their operations. And you can imagine in this post-COVID world, that's a challenge. How to figure out with much lower density, how to make the numbers work, and how to deal with the fluctuations in which teachers are available and which kids are actually coming in. And making that all work is partly a business challenge. And so we created a cash flow template and created trainings with over 40 childcare providers to help them plan for how to reopen. They're really the gateway of our economy right now. And it's been really great to work in that area. And let me turn now to the business, where your gifts empowered some really small businesses in being able to create or preserve 133 jobs and prepare them for the economy that lies ahead. Many of the new loans were in the farm and food space, and yet also in urban areas, like in Manchester, where we worked with Juba International Grocery. And what we did with the technical assistance was to help them to figure out how to better manage their inventory. We actually introduced them to a point of sale system. You know, this is where you have that barcode when you go to the larger grocery stores. What's amazing is, but by being better able to track their inventory, this grocery store's margins really improved because they were able to make sure that the most profitable and popular items were always available. So in sum, your gifts really work to create a better New Hampshire. And before we tell another story about a business, I want to introduce you to Charlene Anderson, our farm and food lender. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Charlene.
Charlene, you're muted.
There you go. Thanks, John. I want to share a story with you about a small New Hampshire business called Mola Foods. It's owned by Jeanette Bryant, a single mom who works full-time in the healthcare sector while also growing Mola Foods. So let me start first with a little bit about the products of Mola Foods. The products consist of seasoning and condiments that are created using recipes handed down from Jeanette's mom and her grandmother. Spices from around the world are selected to provide what Jeanette calls culture in a bottle. The products contain no added preservatives, are non-GMO, are certified vegan, which reflects Jeanette's vision to provide healthy, flavorful food to everyone. We first met Jeanette in early 2019 when she was seeking a small loan. We were so impressed with Jeanette's approach to growing the business in a methodical manner and her coachability that we wanted to help. However, our initial analysis found that the business would best be supported with technical assistance first and then debt. Because of you, we were able to provide Jeanette a grant to help her improve her website and her marketing. And I encourage you to check out her website at molafoods.com. We also worked with her to build an advisory board, or what some may call a sounding board. And the board consists of people who bring experience, connections, and advice to Jeanette. But more importantly, it helps break down the isolation that she as a sole entrepreneur has to deal with every day. And the advisory board is that mechanism to connect her to a bigger team. We continue to provide guidance to Jeanette to build her skills, to develop new accounts, and to connect her with business resources. So let's hear from Jeanette how your valuable donations have made a difference.
People say that I have big dreams, and yes, I'm not scared to say that I do have big dreams. Growing up in Cameroon, I spent nights, I didn't have anything to eat, I slept without food. We were food insecure, and because of that insecurity, we formed a group of people, of young girls in the community to help each other with food, right? And so I made a promise to myself that my children will never have to live the life that I have lived in Cameroon. And when I came to the United States, I kept that dream alive. And so to me, when I started Mola Foods, that was the idea. With any new business, you go through learning periods. Although you know what you want to do, how do you get there essentially becomes an issue. And that was one of the reasons why at some point I had to reach out to the Community Loan Fund and say, listen, I need help. I don't know what kind of help you guys can give me, but I really need somebody to come in and kind of like help and guide me. The Community Loan Fund coming in was, the questions they were asking me was, how can we help you? What can we do to help? Marketing was essentially one of the aspects that I needed from them the most. And that's one of the aspects that they provided. They helped fine-tune my skills as a managing CEO of the company. They helped tune my financial skills, for example, budgeting skills. They helped me create the board of advisors and also helped me for a couple of months to make sure that I have essentially all the marketing tools that I need to make sure that the business can be visible. It made a big impact into my small business. The Community Loan Fund is great. I feel humbled because their main focus is to make sure that small business succeed in New Hampshire, and essentially small business that know what they are looking for and what they are all about, and they are moving towards that. And so I think I qualify for that.
So that's awesome. And I hope, you see why we wanted to help her. I mean, she is just fabulous. And, I want to thank you for providing the opportunity to us to work with Jeanette. I mean, it's business owners like her and your support that makes this work so rewarding and so impactful. And I'm getting a little choked up, sorry. It makes me so proud. And I want to thank you, and I need to turn it back to John pretty quick now. Thanks.
That's awesome. Nice work on your part too, Charlene. The joy, that so clearly comes across from what Jeanette shared just now. It reflects the opportunity and the pride that many of our borrowers experience. Really great. Thanks for sharing that. So as we look to the future, we're going to meet the challenges that lie ahead by doing what we've done for the past 37 years, which is to work both sides of the bridge and to continue to evolve our strategies. So about the last 2 years, we faced a very large opportunity where we actually had to fundraise prior to the start of the project. And what we discovered when we did that, instead of having the project and then fundraising, when we went earlier in the process and we mobilized people in advance, what we discovered was that the ask actually was more compelling and our work was more visible locally. And when we were local and visible, we unearthed other needs in the community. So one of the next developmental steps we're going to take as we continue to evolve is to look for ways to become more localized in our strategies. So we're going to do this next month in Portsmouth. This is a picture of a Woodbury Cooperative, a resident group that wants to revitalize their park in the spring. So next month, I think October 15th, we're going to have a webinar to kick off a local fundraising campaign and to help rally that community behind supporting that group of residents in their effort. So this past year, with the virus, killing of Black citizens, social unrest, racial inequalities have become clear. And Manchester will be one of the first local areas where we pilot this more localized effort. We're going to partner with the Manchester NAACP, and our purpose is going to be to listen and to build on the voices of the folks from the neighborhood. You know, after all, they have agency. They just need access to the kind of the capacity building that we've been talking about today and access to capital. So, New Hampshire Community Loan Fund, our full name. You don't need to always say the New Hampshire as you're sharing the joy of what you've learned today. You can drop the New Hampshire part, but please don't drop the community part. It's the most important part of our name. It speaks to why our work is called community economic development, not just economic development. When more supporters from the community are enlisted in the solution, more solutions become possible. More fairness becomes possible. So I suspect you've joined us today because you're pleased and proud of what your donations are accomplishing. Please share that joy with your neighbors who might feel the same way and invite them to join our community. Thank you so very much.
Thanks, John, and Charlene and Jeanette. This is awesome. I love the smiling faces as we watch the video. I love being able to see everybody. And before we jump into our question and answer period, we did have one more poll that we wanted to throw up for everybody so that we can see if we are communicating the way that you want to be communicated with. So this poll reads, we want to keep you informed about what we're doing with your donations. What's the best way for us to do that? So go ahead and pick your choice of your method, and this will help us shape the way that we communicate with you and our other donors to make sure that you guys are getting the information that you want. And as donors, all of you should have received a note or a phone call or an email from me saying, thank you very much for your donation. So let me know how those are going too. The answers are rolling in here, and Steve will put up the poll results here in just a moment.
All right, ready.
All right, so here we go. So it looks like calls like this one. Excellent, that's what we like to hear. I like the interactivity. I like to see the folks I'm chatting with. So I'm glad to hear that this is a great way to do it. And this will help us maybe figure out how to do another one here before too long so we can continue to share the impact of your donations. So this is where we're gonna jump into the question and answer period. And I know that Susan Almy had a great question in the chat, and she had asked, how do you get the meetings done? And she was referring to the ROC self-governing meetings. She says, how did you get the meetings done? I run a small HOA, homeowners association, and I can't decide what to do about the annual meeting. About a third of the folks have not enough internet capability, and 2 of them are in wheelchairs. So I don't know, John, do you have any comments about how our ROC team has helped facilitate these meetings?
Well, I wish that Tara were here to give more details, but what I know is, of course, the easy answer is when the weather is good and warm, they actually have convened a number of meetings outdoors. And sometimes what they needed to do was at the end of the driveway, they might have, 8 or 10 driveways where they would gather and have information sharing, and then move to a different section of the park and have another, similar conversation, and then kind of report back what they found and gathered from that information sharing. So sometimes it's dividing it up like that. Sometimes it is just investing in the computer equipment and the training to facilitate more people learning how to be comfortable in online connecting. So no easy solutions there for you, Susan. I think it's particularly challenging, of course, as winter, is ahead of us. I do know that one of the techniques that Tara used was, as part of those meetings, we actually brought a bunch of yardsticks that had our rock branding on it, and literally helped to make sure that people knew what 6 feet actually meant, to make sure that we and they stayed safe in the process.
Great, thank you, John. And I realized that I'm offering you guys to have all these questions that you want to ask, but I didn't tell you how to do it. So to actually be able to ask a question, go ahead, and at the bottom, there's a participants button. And if you press on that participants button, it brings up a little box. In that box, there are 3 dots in the bottom right-hand corner. And if you click on that, you can go ahead and click raise hand. And that will raise your hand, and then we can go ahead and call on you and unmute you. And so we definitely need to unmute you to be able to hear you. So I open it up to questions here. So feel free, folks, to go ahead and raise your hands if you need to. Again, just the participants button, then click on the 3 dots and click raise hand. I'm hoping that the quietness is because people have had all of their questions answered and everything and aren't struggling to ask a question. If you're having any trouble, feel free to use that chat box at the bottom as well. We're happy to answer questions via that method as well.
Matt, it looks like we have a question from Jordy.
All right. So Jordy, Steve, can you go ahead and unmute Jordy? I don't seem to have the power to do that right now, but Jordy, we'll unmute you and you can go ahead and ask your question.
No.
I love technical difficulties. We'll figure this out shortly here.
Did Jordy unmute herself?
Oh.
I did.
Well, we had you, Jordy. Go ahead, and I think you might be able to unmute yourself.
Okay, got it. I usually like being muted, so this is a new experience. So I'm wondering, like, as donors right now, what's the best thing we can do to help the work of the loan fund?
Wow, what a generous question. I appreciate that. I would say give to our annual fund. What I love most about that is, it's the gift that keeps on giving every year. It's sort of the dollar amount that you're comfortable with that you'll give every year. Because by growing that is how we're going to get sustainable over the long term. Mm-hmm. And so that's just the most important piece. And I think somehow, not being, we need to broaden the constituency of supporters. And I think the best way to do that is gifts to the annual fund. I think the second answer that I might give is to share that the most difficult money to raise is the permanent equity, the permanent capital. This is the capital that is needed as ballast to leverage investor capital coming in. It's like, think of it as a magnet that sits at the bottom of the maple syrup bucket, that when you make an investment, it's backstopped by gifts that sit in the bottom of that maple syrup bucket. So think on your hand, you've got 5 fingers, 4 fingers and 1 thumb. So for every 4 fingers of new capital that we bring in, we've got to keep pace. We've got to raise $1 of grant or equity money. And that's the hardest. It's terrific leverage because, as again, it leverages those 4 investor dollars coming in, but it is the most difficult. So if I may, I might have those 2 answers. Encourage everyone to become annual donors through our annual fund, and to recognize that the hardest money to raise is that permanent equity.
Thanks, John. And thank you, Jordy, for your question. I really appreciate that. Susan, you had your hand raised and you're unmuted, so you can go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, sorry about 2. This is totally different from your poll. Most of us would like to find out things through calls like this. My problem is once we're past COVID, and I don't know how many other people have this problem, on lunch hour during the week just doesn't work.
Yeah, COVID has definitely made things a little bit different for us. And I think one of the biggest things that it's had to do for all of us, all of society, not just the Community Loan Fund or you guys, is we've all had to adapt and change. And these Zoom calls are an example of that adaptation and change. And I think that it's exciting too, because it means that we're willing to try new things. And so our calls in the future may be Zoom calls, depending on COVID. It might be something else where it's a little bit more local and in person. There's going to be a lot of flexibility there. John, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, I like that. And I think, in the past, this is kind of similar to a house party that some of you as supporters have sort of brought people into your home and had that sense of community and taken this moment to sort of go in depth on the kind of work we're doing and for you to express the joy you have of being part of this. I mean, that's been very effective in the past at helping to grow our core support. And, in a post-COVID world, that's going to happen again. And meantime, it's just awesome to have these Zooms.
Looks like John Hennessy had a question, and his question in the chat is, what % of your operating income comes from capital income and how much from the annual fund and other sources?
Well, I will wish that Bonnie, our CFO, were here, but in general, I would say that the income from our capital, so the spread between our cost of capital and the money we lend out, that spread is the major part of our earnings. And we're getting more and more sustainable, in part because we're attracting lower cost capital, because that spread is being challenged by the needs in the community are lower and lower cost capital. So I'd say the vast majority of our operations comes from that spread. And what it doesn't cover, that spread doesn't cover, is the technical assistance that we've talked about. And that's why all your gifts and donations go to that technical assistance. And in terms of the annual fund, maybe Matt, you can speak more to the percentages or the dollar amounts. I know you have done a great job of helping us to really increase the amount of annual fund donations over the years.
Yep. So we were looking at the scorecard from the last couple of years, and it's under between 8 and 10% is what the annual fund covers of our operating budget. The vast majority, like we were mentioning, comes from that spread and that earnings. As a follow-up question, John asks, how much capital do we have?
173 million.
That's an easy one. All right, looks like
And
Donna
and I would say, John, to everyone, that sounds like a big number, right? But also know that our ROC team right now has 10 acquisitions, conversions, resident groups that have come to them and said, hey, we'd like to try to enlist your help in helping us to buy our park. And the childcare is an area that's really going gangbusters as well in terms of what we can do. So that capital may seem like a big number, but we're needing to continue to raise a lot more capital. And ideally, it's the lower cost capital between, longer term, 5 years and longer, and at a cost of 2% or less is particularly valuable. That's what will help us to meet the borrower's needs where they're at and sustain ourselves as the bridge to be effective at the work we do.
Thanks. Looks like Donna's raised her hand and she had a question. And Donna, you are unmuted, so ask away, please.
Thank you. John, you said that investment funds were the hardest to raise, and I'm not sure I know what investment funds are and how you raise them and what our role might be as supporters.
Well, thanks for that opportunity to clarify, because in fact, Donna, what I meant to say is the hardest capital to raise is the equity, the gifts, the donations that come and build our donations, which is a magnet that attracts investor capital. We've raised a tremendous amount. I think we've doubled in size in the last 5 years, which is tremendous in terms of our investor capital. So that has been relatively easy. What's been hard is that we need to keep about 20% of our capital in that big bucket. 20% really needs to be grants, equity. So we can, in order to meet the growing needs in our community, we're needing to grow the size of the capital in that bucket. And it's relatively easy to raise the 4 fingers, but raising that additional dollar every time we try to respond to a resident group or a small business or childcare, in order to meet their needs, we need to be growing more of that equity, the thumb. And so it's really the permanent equity that's hard to raise, not the investor capital. I hope that that clarifies for you.
Look, I have a follow-up question. It's been a while since I've looked at this, but there used to be a way that someone who had the funds available might be able to make a loan to you of, say, $5,000 that would come back to them with a certain percent, possibly, or maybe no interest, but maybe interest. Is that what you're referring to?
So yeah, so I think it's really helpful to really break this down, because sometimes, on staff, we just sort of assume everyone knows this, but I really appreciate the clarity of your question. So what it takes for us to do this work, to be responsive to these borrower needs in the community, is really 3 things. First, we need what we talked about earlier today. We need grants that will pay for the part that's not sustainable in our operations, to provide the capacity building, to create the sense of possibility, and to meet the borrowers where they're at, and to help them with the technical assistance. So that's the first type of money we need. And that's what you as donors have contributed to. Now, the second type of capital we need is investments. So kind of we rent your capital so that you know where your money is sleeping at night. And we use that to make investments, make loans that haven't been made by others. And we fill capital gaps. So that takes loan capital. And that's the vast majority. I think in our bucket of 173 million, 146 million is made up of 651 investors who each have made investments in us in any range from $5,000 to $50,000 to $500,000. And those are for different periods of time. A minimum is a year. And the longer you commit and the lower the interest rate, the more mission work we can do in the community. So that's the second type of capital that we need to do our work, is investor capital. Those are the 4 fingers. The last type of capital we need are gifts that go to our permanent equity. That's the magnet, that's the thumb that pulls in those other investors. Because this is the way it works. When investors look at our work, they're really inspired often, but they also want to know that they are going to get that investment back. And I'm really pleased to say that in 37 years, there's not been a single investor who's not been paid back. Now, the lawyers amongst you will know the importance of saying past performance is no dictate of future performance, but that's the track record. And partly it's because where there has been a loss in our portfolio, it gets absorbed by the permanent equity, the thumb piece of the capital. That absorbs any losses in our portfolio. And so it's also when investors look at whether to invest or not, they look at the size of our grants in that bucket. And when it's less than or if the trend is down, that becomes something we have to answer to. So we've been really good at raising more investor capital, but where we've fallen a little bit short is in the amount of equity, permanent equity. And so that's the most important. That's the hardest money to raise. So those are 3 ways that capital is used. Did that help to clarify?
Yes, thank you.
You're very welcome. And thank you again for probing on that. Because with this clarity, right, we get more people to understand how they see themselves in the solution to our work.
Great. Thank you. That was excellent. Daniel Weeks had a question. And so Daniel, go ahead and ask away.
Good afternoon. Great to be here. Thank you, John and Matt, and nice to see some other friends on this call. I just had to throw in a background here, which is a solar project that my company Revision did with the Community Loan Fund at Mascoma Meadows, one of the wonderful rocks in Lebanon. My question though, John, I actually just came out of another meeting on New Hampshire small businesses and the economic recovery to COVID. I can't think of an organization that has kind of a better finger on the pulse than you all in terms of New Hampshire economic activity and our struggles, because I know you lend to a wide array of small businesses and provide technical assistance as well as supporting nonprofits. Just this doesn't necessarily pertain so much to your own operations, but as you think about, we still have a few tens of thousands of granted staters out of work. As you think about building back a sustainable, healthy economy, are there kind of strategically particular sectors that you're looking to maybe do more investing in and technical assistance in? Where do you see the best opportunities that we can, and how could we maybe assist you in helping our state build back as well as sustainably as possible?
Well, thank you, Dan, and thank you for your partnership with Revision. It's a pleasure not only for the kind of contribution that you make and our partnership accomplishes with climate change, but to be able to bring that kind of solar work to our resident-owned cooperatives. You mentioned the one that is pictured, and we've done 3 or 4 more of those, and it's just a delight. But to your question in terms of, what are the sectors that are really important? I'd have to say childcare. Let's think about how they have really played 2 pivotal roles. Before COVID, there's a Nobel economist who I think has identified that this is like the economic development strategy that gets overlooked because traditional economic development just doesn't focus on childcare. But in fact, if you do, the return on equity, the return on investment is really high. It's like 12%. For every dollar we're going to, as a community, save and get that kind of return. Then you bring in COVID and the economic disruption, and suddenly you become aware, wow, like how are businesses going to reopen if they can't have a place for their children to go? And if people can't feel confident about how their children are being cared for during the day, how can they be productive at work? So I would say that, as is in the poll, I love all of our programs. I think one of the more challenging areas and where technical assistance and gifts are really important is childcare.
Thanks, John, and thanks, Daniel, for your question. Susan Almy had a follow-up question in the chat, John, and her question is, what is the operational difference between equity and grants?
Hey, John.
Yes, would you like to take that?
I'll take that.
Go for it.
I'll take that question. So Susan, equity and equity, there's two things. There's our annual fund, which is grants and donations, which takes care of our technical assistance. And then there's permanent capital, which is also called equity, is also gifts and grants. And so that works more with our lending activities. So that's the difference between the two. So for instance, it acts as a backdrop to our a backstop to our investors, as to have that fund there. But it also, that money's also loaned out as well sometimes, and it's loaned out to make lower cost loans that we couldn't make with our investor dollars. And so we'll see some of that with our the project in Portsmouth, which is the Woodbury Cooperative. We're going to use some of that money to make lower cost loans. And then we also have a housing assistance loan program where we help our welcome home loans. We help them with second mortgages. So we use that money in lending instances as well. But that money is also, they're both donations and grants. So the annual fund money is donation and grants, and so is the permanent capital, but they have different functions. Did that make sense?
She's nodding her head, Debbie. I don't know if you could see that.
Okay. Great.
Excellent. We had another question from Lois and Howard, and they said, where or to what organizations do you typically go to apply for grants? And so, John, I don't know if you want to go with that. You want me to answer it? However you want to handle it.
Debbie and join in. What I would say is, we all hands on deck. It takes all hands on deck to make this possible. And we typically, begin the fiscal year without knowing, exactly where that is. But because of the faith that we have and the support we've earned over the years and your help, it's also your connections. Not only does your gifts very valuable to us, but if you know of a foundation, a church, another supporter, please help us, because this is an all hands on deck opportunity. Matt and Debbie, maybe you can add to that.
Yeah, we also, we make a list of foundations every year that we can apply to, as well. Bethany Tarbell, our grant manager, is on the call as well. We get I can tell you we get very little government money. I mean, very, very small, but we do have one source that we apply to each year. You may see that come out in the newspaper this week, but yeah, I think that, it's hard. It's hard raising that. John says it's hard raising permanent capital, which is very, very true. It's the hardest, but also the sources for donations and grants, or especially grants, is getting smaller and smaller as well. So the more we can make sure we expand our base on annual fund giving, the more we can do that, the better for us. So that's where we need your help. We need your help.
And we love the individuals being a larger portion of that, because that's the most renewable, and it helps to spread the work, spread the news about the work we're doing. I also value, churches who want to, make donations and invest their endowments in ways that reflect their values, and foundations the same. Another group is banks. They've played an important part of some of our capital, and in some cases have also made gifts. So there's kind of a diverse group that make it possible for us to be doing this work, but it's really anchored by individuals. This group of supporters are the most important, because it's the relationships. This is all relationship work. And the more people that are informed, and the more people know about our work, that's what's going to spread. That's what's going to build the community of support that we need to meet the growing needs in our community.
So if you have more ideas, let us know. Thank you for the Burn Foundation throw out there. That was great.
Other questions, other comments? This is meant to be interactive, so please, if you don't have a question and you just want to have a comment, we welcome those as well. So feel free to raise your hand and unmute yourself. Oh, Susan Almy, I love it. Go ahead, Susan.
I'm sorry I keep on doing this, but
There's no need
I'm
to
really curious as to whether you've found any solutions to the child care problem, which has been there since my sister had kids 45 years ago, which is that you want people that are well-trained and stable to be the child care providers on all of the workers, and that should cost money, but you can't afford to pay it because the people who need the child care can't afford to pay their entire salary over to the child care operator. And without some kind of permanent government backing or some kind of backing like that? How does this work?
So it's you've analyzed it absolutely correct. And it is a lack of reimbursement rates that has made this work nearly impossible. Even before COVID, these are thin margin businesses that are struggling, and given the import of the work they do, they ought not to be struggling. So there's definitely a policy element to the solution, 100%. In addition, I think, we got to deal with the cards that were dealt and try to make iterative improvement. And so meeting the borrowers where they're at means, in fact, I was just on a conversation earlier today, our strategy is going to be to listen to what their particular needs are. Lots has changed. So we're in the discovery mode of trying to hear what the providers are needing in this moment. And, one of the partnerships that we're looking at deepening is to make these hubs possible. So the back office operations of a childcare, it's not about teaching or the curriculum. It's about, accounts receivable collections. It's about insurance. It's about buying, supplies. Some of those can have the back office functions in a particular region. You might have a hub and engage a group of maybe 6 or 7 in a particular area to share some back office capacity. And so instead of each of those 6 childcare providers sharing and doing mainly the teaching and the curriculum, but on the side trying to cope with those other back office responsibilities, instead one of them would hire someone who's really good at all those 6 back office functions, and then provide that support for all 6 of the groups. So that's something that is what we're working with and partnering with other groups like Early Learning New Hampshire, who also cares about the business side. I think the missing ingredient sometimes, not only on the reimbursement rate, but it's helping these childcare providers who do so well by our children and who are so gifted at the teaching side, how to help them be strong as business people as well.
Thank you.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Susan. Thank you, everybody, for your great questions and comments. I've got about 12:55, and we'd set this up to be about an hour long. I'm happy to stay on and answer additional questions as we have them come up, but I do want to just take a minute to say thank you. Thank you for coming. Thank you for donating. Thank you for supporting us. We couldn't do the work that we do, and our borrowers couldn't be successful without you. And I hope you really understand that. So if you have any questions or anything else that has come up, my contact information is up on the screen. To be honest, you probably all have it already, but I have an open door, open phone. So please feel free to give me a call or send me an email. And again, just thank you from the bottom of my heart. I love what I do, and you guys help me do what I do. So thank you.